Welcome, everyone, to this webinar brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitronistim. This is now our second week at war and our second week of war briefings. And I thank all of our viewers, all of our supporters for tuning in each day. A very big thank you, of course, to Brigadier General Amir Avivi for being here with us throughout his very busy schedule. As you can see right now, he's driving between very important interviews and briefings, but he's here with us to keep us informed and connected to what is happening here in Israel in this war. And we thank him for his tremendous leadership on an international level, speaking out for Israel and defending Israel. We are also very happy to be joined right now by Elie Pierpz, who is the Director of International Affairs for IDSF. And although you can't see it by his calm demeanor right now, right before we started this briefing, there were Tseva Adoms, there were these air raid sirens across Israel, including where Elie is in Jerusalem, and he had to take cover. So Elie, thank you so much for being safe and now being able to join us. And with that, we're going to begin with General Avivi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moshe. So basically, we started with real chaos and uncertainty and Lebanon and Gaza and what will happen and so on. But as days goes by, we see the picture. It's starting to be clear. In the north, we are on defense for different reasons why Hezbollah is leash and not so fast going to do something. One is because Iran is not interested. In the first place, they didn't send them to fight last week. They need Hezbollah intact in order to defend themselves. The second reason is Israel. They didn't attack at the beginning. Now we are in full capability. All the divisions, all the forces of the IDF are in the north. The north is ready. The Air Force and intelligence are now really one big war machine working really well. This is not exactly the right time to challenge us. The other reason is that Lebanon is a state. Most of the people that they don't want a war, they will blame Hezbollah for it. They might try to overthrow Hezbollah. So Hezbollah has to take in account also the state of Lebanon. And the last but not least reason is the massive US presence and the fact that the US posed a military threat on Iran and on Hezbollah and intends to intervene if they fight us. So for all these reasons, what Hezbollah is mainly doing is shooting here and there anti-tank missiles, which unfortunately also injured and killed people. They shoot occasionally a bit of mortars to our bases, but everything they do is really taking in account they don't want a war. So they cannot not do anything when we really hit Gaza, but it's obvious that they don't want a war. But the dilemma is not if they want a war, the dilemma is really if we want a war with them, because we have to understand that what we saw last week with Hamas, with the Nukhba force that stormed our towns, Radwan, that is sitting on the Lebanese border, the commando of Hezbollah in the Lebanese border, in the Lebanese border, is much stronger, much bigger, much more dangerous, and with much more capabilities than the Hamas. So for us, really, it might be seriously problematic to deal with a reality where at the end of this war, after we send all the troops back, the towns in the north remain with Radwan forces 100 meters from them. It's not a reality we can live with. So I would say this: we want to concentrate on Gaza. We want to destroy Hamas. We don't want now to deal with Hezbollah, but we'll have to deal with them at a certain point. Maybe it will be in 3 months, maybe 2. I don't know, maybe not now, but this reality won't remain. We will have to deal with them, and it's something that should be obvious. In Gaza, we are continuing to encourage the society to go south. We are hitting all the time with the Air Force as hard as we can, but we see that Air Force is not a magical solution. The Hamas is still operative. The Hamas is still shooting rockets, as we see, even to Jerusalem. So eventually we'll have to maneuver. The ground forces are highly motivated, ready, and I would say that I don't know when, any moment. I would assume that the next day too, sometimes in the near future, we'll see the army maneuvering, and we are going to destroy completely Hamas. They are going to be destroyed. They are not going to exist, not as a military force and not as a government in Gaza anymore. But I must say, it will take time. It's not something that takes days and not weeks. It will take months. Maybe the initial maneuver will be fast, but then cleaning up all of Gaza and finding also our hostages, which are more than 200, will take a lot of time. I can say that thanks to many of you and Jews all over the world and donors, huge amounts of goods have arrived for the soldiers. We sent tons of equipment to all the soldiers, and they're really appreciative for that. The morale is really, really high in the field. Everybody wants to go in and fight. We just need to let them do what they need to do. Really, really fight and win the war for us. In Judea and Samaria, we apprehended many, many Hamas leaders and also killed some. Inside Israel, I must say that things look stable at the moment. I don't know how it will look when we'll start maneuvering in Gaza, but there is very high alert. We managed to send the police and the border patrol more than 1,000 volunteers, and I must say that there are thousands of people who want to join the army and the police. Many Haredim, by the way. It's amazing to see what a change in this community, the Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox. They, I think, finally understand what's going on here, and they want to join the army and they want to join the police. And we're facilitating that. It's a lot of work. We are flooded with things we need to deal with, but it's a huge opportunity really to enhance Israel's security. Moshe, if we let Elie for a moment present some things.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Amir. And again, my name is Elie Pierpz, and I head up international affairs at Bitronissim, at Israel's Defense and Security Forum. And I wanted to share, I imagine many of you have seen a lot of the support, the significant support that Israel has received pretty much across the board, from the US, but also from throughout Europe, a tremendous amount of support. And it seems like it's, very strong words, which is certainly at this point very well received. But one of the things that we've been doing while I think one of the last questions, or one of the last things that Amir was addressing, was how soon Israel is going to commence its ground invasion, the expected ground invasion. Every day there have been heads of state, there have been ministers of foreign affairs, ministers of defense from throughout Europe, and many in the US have been coming to visit and getting a chance to understand exactly what Israel dealt with, partially to make sure that people understood and actually saw some of the horrific, barbaric activities of Hamas, of the Palestinian Hamas leaders who went ahead and did that on Shabbat. It's important that it isn't just heard about. It's not just looking at pictures, because we're now living in the age of AI, but people actually needed to see it themselves. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. And part of the reason for that is we understand that this is going to be a relatively long campaign. It's not a campaign, it's a war. And as a result, we're going to need to have the international community standing by Israel, because if we are going to do something as much as putting in our military back into Gaza for the long term on a semi-permanent basis, that is going to be very difficult for many of our allies who are staying by us now, for them to accept. But we need them to understand that that is what's going to be requested of them. That's what Israel's going to need to do. And we're going to need to do it whether we have the international support or not. Obviously, it is a lot better if we can have international support. So part of the effort that's being done right now is to work on that diplomacy and trying to see where we have allies who are going to stick with us all the way through, and where we have allies who are going to be a little bit weaker. That's something that the government is doing right now. And I would say, for those of you, I'm sure you're all over the world on this call, right now, certainly calls to your elected officials, letting them know that their support is extremely supportive, extremely necessary. Again, Israel's going to do what Israel needs to do. We'd like to do it with as much international support as we can. And we hope that that's not going to completely deter us. But obviously, the more support we get, the better off it will be. I will also add that there are a couple of things before I see we have a lot of questions, and I want to be able to get to that. But I think there are a couple of things that it would be good for you to be aware of that I think would be very valuable for Israel. Number one is, just as Amir was saying, the eradication of Hamas needs to be the goal of this war. Anything less than that is not going to keep Israel safe, and that obviously does not justify what we're trying to accomplish. Number two is the releasing of the hostages. As Amir was saying, we have over 200 hostages. Hopefully, they're all in Gaza. Some of them may have already been transferred to other countries. Very, very difficult and complicated negotiations to try to free them, release them. And I know that Hamas is putting pressure on all the countries that they have dual nationals in. Makes it very difficult and complicated. But that, again, expressing the importance, the need, the urgency of getting our hostages returned is, again, something else that I think you could express to your elected officials that they should make sure to keep fighting for. Number three is Israel's been trying to push for there to be an ability for Gaza's civilians to leave Gaza through Egypt. We do not want humanitarian efforts to be made in Gaza. We want all humanitarian efforts to be made outside of Gaza to encourage the flow of Gaza's civilians to leave Gaza, and also for there to be some sort of a process where we could check who is a civilian, who is a member of Hamas, potentially somebody who's trying to smuggle out some of our hostages. Again, even that is a complicated process, but trying to make sure to the best that we can that we get support to push both for Egypt to allow in Gazan civilians to leave, and that they should be encouraged to leave Gaza itself so that Israel can have as much freedom to operate as possible. Another thing is Hamas senior officials have been staying in countries like Qatar and Turkey. They are going to be needed. We need to hold them accountable and start putting pressure, again, speaking to your elected officials, encouraging them to put pressure on Qatar and Turkey, whether to hand over those leaders eventually to stand trial in Israel. That's the kind of things that we want to have happening, and those are practical things I think people can realize. And then the last thing is, as I said at the beginning, is creating the space that the IDF is going to need to have a military presence in Gaza, creating the space that can happen. That's going to take a lot of political willpower on our allies, because that's something that they are not generally comfortable with. It's not something that we necessarily want to do, but if that is what the IDF determines, that's the only way that we can keep ourselves safe, I guarantee that is what the military is going to decide and the government's going to decide to do. And to the extent that we could have a support from allies throughout the world, that would be most helpful. So I would say those are probably the top 5 things that if you wanted to write letters, if you want to make phone calls to your elected officials, that would be extremely helpful. And I'd be happy to work with Moshe to put this out in some bullet points so that you can just
and
distribute
Elie,
it.
also, if people want to organize Zooms for elected officials, for us to brief them, a part of the work we do, you know, and you lead, can organize, you know, some briefings.
Absolutely. We could probably arrange that, and particularly if you know your congressman, or if you want to join with your congressman if you're in the U.S., or your elected official if you're in another country, let us know, and we will try to set something together with your elected official. That obviously makes it a little bit more effective for us. We're obviously just in Israel, but if it's in Israelis with one of their constituents, that has a little bit more punch. And at this point, we need as much punch as we can. So yeah. With that, I think there's a lot of questions.
Thank you. Yeah, before the questions, I'll give more time today, Moshe, for the questions. And we'll make it longer today if people have time. I want to share with you guys shortly what worries me. You know, in the first few days, I think the real mission of IDSF was to bring the understanding to the government, to the army, to the people, that there is only one option. It's conquering Gaza and destroying Hamas, and there's no way to do it from the air or any other way. So this was really what we were focusing on. Now everybody understands, and this is what's going to happen. And really the next issue is the day after the operation. And this is a huge discussion because unfortunately there are people who, doesn't matter what reality shows, the day after they want to bring the Palestinian Authority to rule again Gaza and make it again a terror hub. This is not something we can agree to. And it's going to be a very, very tough fight over this issue. So maybe we're going to send our soldiers to get killed, to fight. We'll destroy Hamas in order to get another terror organization to rule the Gaza Strip. So we have to start talking about that. This is what we are doing on media, research, social media. We cannot allow, again, entities like the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, to rule Gaza again. And we need to ensure full freedom of operation forever. And we need to control the Gazan border. You know, yesterday it was unbelievable. They showed the amount of weapons that were caught. It's unbelievable. It's a huge amount of mines and the anti-tank missiles and weapons, and it's always smuggled through Egypt, and Egypt enables this. Egypt is enabling endless amount of weapons to be smuggled into Gaza. If we don't control this border, it's just a matter of time until Gaza will go back to be what it was. Now, what I'm saying is supposed to be so crystal clear. It's not clear. The government, the army, they don't still understand that. We'll have a huge fight and a huge campaign to do to really make sure that we don't do the same mistakes. I can say that, of course, there is an awakening. Okay, people understand, change their mind. Such a catastrophe, of course, changes people. But unfortunately, I see it on the panels, on TV, same generals with the same follies, and they're really not necessarily understanding. They will say, yes, we have to destroy Hamas. But then when you ask them, okay, what's next? They go back to the same mistakes that they did before. And this is terrible. And we have a lot of work to really make sure that all that we are doing now is not for nothing. It's not something that after a few years we'll go back to what was now. Okay, I downloaded all my frustrations, and now we can answer questions.
There are many great questions coming in. Thank you for everyone sending questions, and everyone of course encouraged to send your questions even if we don't get to them. There are a number of questions about Iran. We're actually hopefully tomorrow planning on having, or the day after, going to have an expert speak about Iran. So I think we're going to hold off on the Iran questions for right now. And General Avivi, maybe you can speak to the reality on the ground in Gaza in terms of the distinction between the north of Gaza and the south of Gaza in terms of the tunnels. Many people are worried that this was an elaborate plan to draw the IDF into Gaza, and they've been planning this with these tunnels for years now. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, first of all, it's true. You know, these guys have been building this infrastructure for 20 years in order to not only be able to launch an offense, but also defend. This is why we're not maneuvering so fast. This is why we're really destroying most of the infrastructure as much as we can. Even the issue for the electricity is dramatic, because without electricity or without gas for the generators, they cannot breathe inside these tunnels. So this is why we're not enabling electricity or any goods to go. This is why we're doing a siege on Gaza. And this, eventually, they will have to go out of the tunnels. They won't be able to survive inside them. So this is regarding the tunnels. When we'll maneuver, it's going to be very, very, very aggressive. And this is why we are encouraging all the Palestinians to move south. But the point is that if we want to destroy Hamas, eventually we'll have to also go south. So then the question is the whole north is demolished, and then you want to go south, what do you do with all the people? And this is why we are talking a lot about the need to pressure Sisi to open the borders and let the Palestinians go into the Sinai Peninsula. I sincerely don't see any other option that can really give a solution to avoid a humanitarian crisis. So this is something we are pressuring the government and the army to really deal with. And eventually we'll have to do it.
Elie, are you maybe able to speak a little bit to the pressure, so to speak, from the international community, or lack thereof, to Egypt and the U.S.-Egypt relationship in terms of hostages and whatnot?
You know, I mean, Egypt is in this awkward position. They officially are at peace with us. However, they have continued to incite their public against us. There's a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric in state media and through the general public. You know, the international community likes to often claim that Hamas, that Gaza is an open air prison, but they never actually look at the map of Gaza to see that one of the borders is actually with Egypt. One of the proofs,
I want to say something about that, Elie. Today I talked to the BBC, and I was talking about this issue, and I said to them, listen, imagine that in the war in Russia-Ukraine, 5 million people want to flee Ukraine because of the war, and all the countries around it close the border and don't let them in. This is what's happening. How can the world be quiet when an Arab country that borders with Gaza says to the civilians, die inside Gaza in a war zone? We're not going to open the border. It's like Poland not opening the border to Ukraine. It's unbelievable, and the world is not getting it. Nobody's saying that.
And I would add even more that you're being complicit with the war crimes of Hamas, because Hamas expects that they're going to do this. They have their battle plan, which includes the international community putting pressure on Israel once there's mounting civilian casualties. But they're counting on those civilian casualties to restrain Israel. So absolutely, I mean, Egypt is part of the problem. But Egypt also, we're relying on Egypt they have a very strong relation with Hamas. And as far as I would imagine, I don't have inside information, but I would imagine that part of the negotiation regarding this hostages is kind of reliant on channels with Egypt. So we're doing what we can. The government certainly is doing what it can to try to allow Egypt to make sure that Egypt is playing a constructive role right now, because there are constructive things it can be doing. But they certainly, over the last 18 years, since we disengaged from Gaza, have not held up their part of the bargain and have allowed in a tremendous amount of weapons, as General Avivi was just
and I want
sharing.
to say something about that. When we complained to the Egyptians that they are not doing their job, they told us, you know, according to the peace agreement, we can put only policemen, and this is not really good units. We need to bring army. We need to bring good units. We led them completely against the peace agreement to bring top units to Rafah to close the border. And guess what? They didn't do anything. They're getting millions of dollars as bribery and transferring endless amount. Today, when I said it on TV, there were two generals that got upset, but you know, you're hurting the relations between Israel and Egypt. And with all due respect, we have a responsibility to our citizens, and we can get angry. We are also allowed to defend our people. And if a country, even if we have peace with them, is doing something that endangers dramatically our people, we have all the right to really be strong on that, and not just all the time be afraid. Wow, Egypt will get upset. Okay, so they'll get upset. And I really have a problem with this. You know, people like, we don't have self-respect. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, there has to be accountability. Otherwise, we end up in a situation where we are right now. We have cold relation with them, but we end up with an army invading us. And like you said, like one of the questioner said, part of that certainly is there's a responsibility. There's blood in Egypt's hands.
Now, we sent out from IDSF the other day an article written by Martin Sherman, and one of our viewers is noting that article, so thank you. And in the article, he speaks about the resettlement potential of Gazans. General, are you able to speak to a person living in Gaza? How ethnically different are they than people living in Egypt? How ideologically different are they? Is it people who go from Gaza to Egypt, is it like night and day, or are they related, distant cousins? Well, how would that work in terms of potential Gazans finding new homes?
Gaza is a result of the artificial border that the Turks and the British did in 1906. And I mean, this is exactly the same people. You know, it's Bedouins, it's people who lived in the Sinai Peninsula. They are all related, talking about families and so on. I must say that under Hamas, the Gazans became much more radicalized, I would say. This is part of the developments that we have been seeing.
Okay, and maybe we'll get more questions are still coming in. Elie, maybe one last question for you of the U.S. interests in this war. Other than fighting evil and standing with an ally, are there any specific interests that the U.S. has such that when people go to their elected officials, they can beseech their officials not because of what's in the best interest for Israel, but what's in the best interest for the U.S.?
Absolutely. And I'll say this is actually probably the key message when General Avivi and I have been in DC, which I think is 3 times probably in the last 10, 12 months. We've been talking about the erosion of American deterrence and the threat of that to world stability. You know, America right now looks at 3 primary, and maybe General Avivi might even, I don't know, he's walking right now. He may not be able to speak so well, but he might be able to speak about this quite even better if he's able to. If not, then I'll take the lead.
Yeah, so Elie, one point is important to say. Everything that's happening now, we briefed Washington twice. We talked about these issues. We described them exactly, these scenarios and the need for American leadership in the Middle East, and everything we talked about is now coming to be.
Yeah. The key is that when Israel destroys Hamas, if America's fingerprints and the West's fingerprints can be on it, it could help to reestablish a certain amount of deterrence that America and the West has lost. And you look at America specifically, you look at America's behavior regarding Afghanistan. President Obama, about 10 years ago, had red lines in Syria. If they were going to, use chemical weapons against their own civilians, America was going to step in. The whole war with Iraq just dragged on and is seen by much of the world as a failure by the U.S. You put all that together, the bad guys in the world are not fearful of the U.S. And as the U.S. is gearing up for potential confrontations with China, with Russia, these are much more extensive and much larger combatants than Iran is. If the U.S. could be a real partner, not boots on the ground any more than bringing in their Air Force carrier, but let Israel do the work, but make it clear that America is standing behind Israel, is supporting Israel, that could help reestablish a deterrence that is completely eviscerated, and is one of the reasons why both U.S. deterrence as well as Israeli deterrence help to bring on this conflict. Israel needs to reestablish its deterrence, but it would help at the same time if America and the West would reestablish theirs. So as much as destroying a Hamas is an immediate Israeli interest, it is 100% also an American interest. Not because they're going to be necessarily breaking into Florida or Alabama. That's not, Hamas probably aren't going to do that. But reestablishing deterrence is absolutely vital for the long term, or even for the short term future of how America is planning on creating a sense of stability in the world. I see that we may have lost Moshe. Yeah. As far as other things, I think that's really the key at this point. There certainly are bad actors. Getting America to see that Iran is not someone that you negotiate with, that these are evil people. They need to be treated that way. That is a long-term American interest. And frankly, again, one of the impetus for this was probably Hamas and Iran's interest in trying to derail the Abraham Accords, which seemed like it was moving forward with getting closer and closer with relations with Saudi Arabia. The truth is, this conflict we now have, this war we have with Hamas, is a test, but it's a test that will guarantee the success of the Abraham Accords, not the opposite. As long as Israel is successful with defeating Hamas, that will reassure Saudi Arabia and other countries that Israel is a country that you want to ally with. If Israel is weakened, if Israel is deterred by Hamas, that is the reason why Saudi Arabia were not interested in being a partner with us. They'll see that we're not useful militarily against Iran, and then how much of the bravado that Israel speaks about, how much of that is something they really want to deal with, or they really need. So for Israel to be successful, and the Abraham Accords is certainly an American interest as well. For the Abraham Accords to be successful, it is 100% necessary for Israel to effectively destroy Hamas. And if you could do it with clear fingerprints of the U.S. and other countries in Europe, that would be a double win. I think we may be having some technical difficulties with Moshe and Amir. Oh, we're back. Hoping that you can hear me okay.
Yeah,
Moshe, you're back. Good.
Yeah, I was definitely having some tech problems. I apologize about that. Although I do think we've reached the end of our time today. We have another phenomenal briefing tomorrow and the next day as well. So please stay tuned. We have some very special guests. Elie was a fantastic guest. We have additional guests tomorrow that you absolutely do not want to miss. General Avivi, do you have any parting words for us?
The morale is high and people are united, and soon enough we'll see how the IDF will destroy Hamas. So everybody be strong and keep talking about the right of Israel to defend itself and secure our country.
Thank you so much, General Avivi. Thank you, Elie, and thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.